Hello and welcome to the Peace Talk, this time with Bozhin Traykov. Bozhin Traykov received his Bachelor in Political Science and Media Studies at the Queen's College in New York. He wrote his master thesis at the Simon Fraser University in Canada and his PhD thesis at the Department of Sociology at the University of Alberta, also in Canada. His research focuses on political economy, neoliberalism, and post-Soviet societies. He was awarded with several fellowships and scholarships. He participated in several conferences. He taught as a teaching assistant and participated in research projects in Alberta and New York. Last but not least, he was invited in Bulgaria Today at the public television, Bulgarian public television, and he published several articles and scientific papers. Bozhin, I'm very glad that you followed my invitation for this talk.
Thank you for inviting me, and hello to you and your viewers. I'm very glad to be here.
First, let us start with some personal questions. As always, I'm curious and I want to know about your academic career. What what motivated you to study? Did you have any academic role models? And yeah.
I guess the decision to study and to continue in the sphere of academia was motivated by several factors. First of all, one of them was the understanding that my sort of political involvement in the history of Bulgaria has to be examined through the lenses of someone who is not only a participant but also interpreter. And now from this point of view, current point of view, I realize that my way of explaining the experiences that happened to me that are in the context of current Bulgarian history is much different from what we could call generalized as the official discourse or the dominant narratives that are prevailing now. I guess to make this short, I have always been politically involved. I've always had interest in history and politics, and I've always felt like I want to contribute and I want to do something about the society we live in, make it a better society. And I thought that the best way to do that is through education. And by education, I mean the broader sense of the word education, something that we used to call prosveta in Bulgarian, right? Which means not only education in a narrow sense of educational institutions and being and teaching, but what's
some sort of enlightenment.
Yes, something like that from the tradition of enlightenment, but politically, basically making citizens aware of the fact that they're also political actors and they should be acting on that right and duty, right? So
yeah. So it's quite a fascinating story, and I believe here we are on the same page. I started also first in some anarchist activist circles, and I moved on from being on the street and protesting and organize some protests and so on and so forth to actually study. And yeah, so here I believe we are on the same page with the goal to make the world a little bit a better place. Yes.
Yes.
So you mentioned also a very interesting topic of, for example, the ideological lenses through which one can look on the past, so to speak. So, and you wrote about Alyosha versus Superman, remembering the past through the ideological lenses of the present. First of all, let me ask, who is Alyosha? For example, because I'm born and raised in Austria, and I'm not so totally aware of Bulgarian culture. And so I don't know who this guy is, or what is it, a comic or a cultural figure, and who uses the past in order to constitute a specific political order and to legitimize a political order and ideology.
Well, this is my master's thesis, which was a long time ago, but interestingly enough, it's quite a timely topic now. It had just came back with with a boom recently, and I'll explain why. But to answer your question, so Alyosha is sort of a nickname. Well, there is a monument in Plovdiv, which I kind of lifted that title of this monument to sort of use it as a symbol of the unknown Soviet soldier, because as we know, the Soviet Union lost millions of people as a result of World War II, which they called the Great Patriotic War. And those people, there are many different nationalities and ethnicity groups in the Soviet Union. So that's sort of like the unknown soldier that combines all of these people who gave their lives. And as to who is trying to use the past, well, in its current political conjuncture, its current moment, which has been going on in the last 3 decades, but I would say that once again, it has exacerbated, I mean, the current events have exacerbated this ideological struggle. Once again, it has intensified with relation to the current events that are happening in Ukraine, right? So, well, there is an attempt to present the past in a one-dimensional way, in a black and white narrative, as the sort of horrible totalitarian experience of the 45 years, and this monument as a symbol of this horrible repressive experience, which I kind of predicted in my MA thesis, that this is going to be space for political struggle, to use the Benjaminian sort of Gramscian also notion of war of position on the ideological front. And as we speak, there have been attempts that started 2 days ago by certain groups to once again vandalize these monuments by presenting themselves as supporters of the Ukrainian struggle for against the Russian invasion, and there is an actual, the sort of war of position has materialized in the sense that there are actual people who are protecting the monument and people who are trying to desecrate it at the same time, that are divided by a cordon of police. So, and this has been going on, and there are also cases of people on the side of the protesters who have been attacked by certain groups that we can call that have certain kind of that we have reason to believe that are sympathizers of extreme right ideologies, including Nazism. Well, let's just call it as it is. Yes, they have T-shirts of Azov battalion, and they have expressed their Nazi views, and they have attacked a certain member of a political organization that is called 23rd of September, and is a left organization, anti-fascist organization, and that happened yesterday, basically. So,
I was also very fascinated in this kind of research and topics because I always was fascinated how power can legitimize itself, and how regimes or some political groups and parties can legitimize some sort of politics and policies. In that regard, I was also very interested in contested past, in constructing narratives, in the politics of memory, and in my opinion, these are tools for legitimizing a power structure, and these are some sort of new or old dimensions of identity politics, but in a different kind of sense. For example, the construction of we know this from anthropology, we know this from political science, and so on and so forth. But it's played on both sides, in my opinion. So, for example, there is this great narrative of everybody's a Nazi, and now we have to invade, for example, I don't know. And in my opinion, every state and every regime used the past in order to predict a future, in order to. So yes, in my opinion, the US has, for example, the, how is it called, the mission, the US mission to import democracy, freedom of speech, and so on. Yes, the
American exceptionalism, I would call it.
Yes. So, and on the other hand, we see the Russian regime use the same tools as well. So nobody's free from it, in my opinion. And also in this kind of research, you wrote an article on post-Soviet blues within real existing capitalism. So there is—
that's my dissertation, actually.
There is there is a different kind of narrative. So after the fall of the Soviet Union and after the 90s, there people from the red changed their color, so to speak, in blue. The same persons, completely different ideology. So could you explain us this anti-communism, neoliberalization, and also fascism that you discovered with this research? And
Well, this is this is the topic of my dissertation, so it's huge, 200 pages work, but I'll try to summarize that. My argument is that anti-communism, we can not only view it as ideology, it's also a mechanism of power, and it's the main mechanism by which the United States has established its hegemony in Eastern Europe. And we can clearly see it now with sort of, or I'm not going that much in that direction, but we can clearly see it with the demise of left political parties in Eastern Europe, which is a process. I mean, I think Bulgaria is sort of like the exception now that has sort of a strong socialist party from the that has remained from the past, but it has undergone such a horrible process of neoliberalization that we can I mean, it's hard to call it a left, but still, if there is some kind of at least on a symbolic level a notion of the socialist party, this is it, and it's destroying itself as we speak with you know, with the current political events in Bulgaria, such as decision to involve of the government to get involved on a particular site in this conflict that is happening right now. But that aside, I think that what's important here is that this anti-communist narrative, as I mentioned in the beginning, with this like one-sided approach, and actually I go into, in my dissertation, I go into this thing that I call speculation with numbers, which what I mean by that is that there have been a lot of literature in history in the field of history. I could hardly call it historiography. I would more likely call it historical propaganda, because what it's what it's doing is basically a sort of a competition on who can come up with the higher number of victims of communism that were killed during the socialist period, and especially the first years of the period, or the so-called Stalinism, right? And what is interesting is that I found out that none of them are actually based on real research in the historical archives and documents. And so far, the only thorough research was done by two historians, Alexander Vezenkov and Georgi Zelengora. And in his book, Alexander Vezenkov actually points out that throughout the whole period, we can actually summarize that the numbers are between certain, like 8,000 to 11,000, which is absolutely different from the kinds of estimations that all of these producers of new history are coming up with, right? With this one-sided anti-communist narrative under the totalitarian framework. And we can actually talk about the totalitarian framework and how it was discredited in the 60s and 70s, and then came back in Europe in the 80s. But it seems that all of Bulgarian historiography now is sort of a slave to this totalitarian model, right? And even in history textbooks, there is a requirement by the Ministry of Education to always say that this was a totalitarian system. Which again, this is an ideological term. This is not an actual historical. There have been many prominent and well-respected historians that have questioned this notion of totalitarianism, of all the 45-year period being totalitarian. Even Stalinism has been questioned whether it's totalitarian. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that Stalinism was a totalitarian system, but that's not the whole 45-year period of Bulgarian history, right? And there's similar processes happening in Eastern Europe as well. As a matter of fact, in all of the European Union, especially with the resolution that was passed in 2019, in September 2019. Which sort of equates communism with fascism and anti-fascism with fascism. So yeah, as radical ideologies leading to violence. So yeah.
What I found quite astonishing is that the Bulgarian elites are so flexible and so yes, flexible in their minds, because how can you turn so quickly from communist, from this kind of, they legitimize this totalitarianism back then, and they they didn't call it totalitarianism, they call it socialism, they call it democratic society, they call it beautiful, they call it wonderful, and suddenly, when the power structure changed, they turned anti-communist, they turned neoliberals, and suddenly they speak about how brutal it was, and they hide their role in there. And my grandmother also told me how these politicians and the big corporations and people from the big corporations received, after the fall of the Soviet Union and after the break, suitcases with money and so this story also I remember from my grandmother telling me this transition.
Well, this is one of the narratives that are prevalent, that the communists turn capitalist, but I think it's a little bit, I mean, I don't dispute it. I think that it's not complete, right? Because in order for this process to happen, and it's definitely not all of the so-called nomenclatura, I would call that's why I'm now differentiating and saying that these are the so-called Gorbachevists, right? The people who were fascinated by the neoliberal model inside the socialist state, and were actually sort of striving for this change to happen. And but to go back, I just wanted to say that there are two categories that I discovered. There are two categories that I discovered roughly. One, you're right, these are the people who are part of the ideological apparatus of the Communist Party, and definitely there was a propaganda sector there, propaganda which was, as you say, again, I mean, I'm not disputing that that the narratives were not necessarily what you could call objective, but whether I would argue that if there's such a thing as objectivity. But the fact of the matter is that these people could be sort of we can say that these people sort of turned from being educated and brought up and actually produced by the Communist Party and as an ideological apparatus, and then became the neoliberal ideologists. People like Ivan Kristev, Evgeny Dayanov, people like that. But another category which is not very talked about is that there are people who remained from, who are connected again, biologically connected to the former elite that was during the time of the alliance between the Bulgarian kingdom and Nazi Germany, that were very fine with, with the type of regime that existed at the time, the right-wing pro-Nazi regime. So these people also being parts of, youngsters being parts of these organizations, fascist organizations, now they are also prominent in Bulgarian politics. That's not to be ignored, because the former Minister of Finance, who is responsible for the negotiations with IMF and putting Bulgaria under currency board, is such a person. His father was part of these fascist organizations, the Bulgarian Legionnaires. So yeah. So that's so it is interesting. You can find the connections in various ways between neoliberal political economy and neoliberal policies, economic policies, and actually anti-communist ideology, right? So, and in my dissertation, I go back and I also see how there are these parallels between the ways that at that time they weren't calling themselves new liberals, because there was no such thing, but let's say liberals like Mises and Hayek and so on, the founders of neoliberalism, were actually in the beginning fascinated by fascism, thinking this would save Europe from the Bolsheviks, right? So this history should not be ignored.
Yeah, and you're also very right in this regard. When we look at the history, for example, August Pinochet in Chile was installed, and also there was this putsch, coup d'etat in Chile against the socialist and democratic elected president at the time, Salvador Allende. Yeah. And he was supported by the Chicago School of Economics, and Hayek visited Pinochet, and the involvement of the historical involvement of Hayek and Pinochet is also very well documented. So I totally understand you, and I totally agree on the part that neoliberalism does sometimes flirt with fascism, neo-fascism, or this kind of authoritarian movements and parties and regimes. And also it is worth mentioning in the interview with Eastern European expert Professor Dieter Zegert, I mentioned the involvement of in the process of transition and transformation of the Bulgarian political order. I mentioned the CIA involvement, National Endowment for Democracy, the action plan for Bulgaria, which was with several key figures. For example, Richard Runn, Ronald Utt, or for example, James Baker. So there are prominent figures well documented also in several books. One can read it in, for example, Killing Hope from William Bloom. Yes. There are some archives from the I believe it's the NSA or CIA archive. So it is quite well documented. One can read it. One can find it very easily, even on Google.
Oh yeah.
So also this kind of how can I say advisory board is in the sense that the transformation was also helped by the West. It's also very important to mention.
I think that Bloom talks about just in the beginning, 1990 or 1991, the sort of democratic forces, the opposition to the Bulgarian Socialist Party newspaper, receiving about 2 million, between 1,500,000 and 2 million lefts by the either National Endowment for Democracy or USAID, but I'm most likely National Endowment for Democracy. But there is a fascinating book by sociologist William I. Robinson, that's called Promoting Polyarchy. And he is documenting exactly the same process, but in relation to Latin America, how the National Endowment for Democracy became the soft wing of the CIA because the CIA was already compromised by all these coups that happened in the 60s and 70s, and it didn't have a good reputation, so they needed to create this kind of like new way of enforcing their power and then establishing hegemony. So I mean,
yes, what about your estimation or observation on the following? In my opinion, the younger generation in Bulgaria, especially living in big cities, are mostly liberals, are mostly in their belief system, in their value system, in their political orientation, are mostly pro-EU, European Union, pro-NATO, and pro this liberal values and kind of political philosophy and thinking. Would you agree with my observation?
I totally agree. Yes, actually, that's something that me and my colleagues. I should mention that I also have a podcast in Bulgarian, and this talk will be on the podcast. But I work with two other colleagues, Polina Manova and Tartu Artinyan, and we are discussing among ourselves about this. It's not a phenomenon; I would call it a process. But I mean, it's understandable in one way because there are two aspects. One is that on the one hand, as I mentioned, the one-dimensional way of presenting the past, which is now in textbooks and media and popular programs and so-called documentaries, and there is a particular, well, there are certain networks that of intellectuals that are producing these narratives on a regular basis, and there's various institutions that what we would call them, for the lack of better words, civil society groups, right? But think tanks, NGOs, and so on that are dismantling these, disseminating these narratives and ways of looking at the past in this kind of one-sided way. So if you create a vacuum, if you sort of create this notion that the ideals of socialism are actually the biggest evil ever, right? If you create this notion that everything coming from socialism is just repression, it doesn't only work on the level of the labor camps and the people that are killed and the repression. there have been attacks, and I mean, it started with this, but then there were attacks on the economic system, saying that this system was bankrupt, that there were secret bankruptcies inside the socialist system. So there is a lot has been done to discredit the notion that public health, I mean, universal healthcare and free education is a good thing, is a common good, you know, and that's very, very important. And the other aspect I would say is that many young Bulgarians choose to continue their education abroad in the West, right? I mean, I'm not exactly in this group, because when I was, I mean, my sort of biography is different, because I became educated in the West, but I'm one of those that sort of left Bulgaria during this harsh economic period of the first shock therapy government, the hardline neoliberalization with the rapid privatization and all that and all the consequences. So I left way before Bulgaria became member of the European Union. So these kinds of benefits that young people got with certain programs to study abroad in this whole process, I'm not a witness to that. You know, I was abroad at that time, but I have experience. I mean, I have observations and talking to friends and all that. So and I can tell you that I mean, on the one thing, the local aspect of this is, first of all, what is available to young people, which is not only the one-sided narrative, but the lack of literature that presents a different point of view on the market itself, right? Like the lack of no books are produced, or no books are being published. I mean, with exceptions, of course, but no books are being republished. You know, I mean, old texts. I mean, I think there is only one book on Karl Marx that has been published recently, and it was because of his anniversary or something, like, well, maybe two or something like that. But you know, you still wouldn't. I doubt that young people are familiar with the works of Gramsci, not to speak of Lenin, of course. I doubt that they read Karl Marx. I mean, there is this aspect of depolitization in universities. So this again contributes to that situation. And of course, if you might, yeah,
in Bulgaria, but you mean in Bulgaria?
Yeah, but it is this. But my experience has been, well, it's diverse, because I have been in several institutions of higher education. But for example, in my PhD experience, I mean, there was one professor that was sort of, you would call him having an interest in Marx and the Marxist tradition, right? But other than that, it was very hard. You would have to do it on your own. And in some way, you kind of become a black sheep after that, you know? So, which I don't know. Maybe in Europe there are more opportunities, but
yeah, in
definitely not in Bulgaria though. In terms of straying from the official narratives.
In my opinion, I see a little bit a different picture. For example, in Austria or in Germany, in Western Europe. In my opinion, especially in social science, in philosophy, in the so-called humanitarian studies, I believe that, for example, gender studies is very popular and famous, and also these progressive ideas are popular. I did a lot of interviews with a lot of professors and scholars who are inspired or were inspired by Marx, Gramsci, Foucault. So there is an intellectual, so to speak, wave of progressives in Western Europe. But yeah, maybe the picture is different in Bulgaria. Yes.
No, these especially post-structuralist theorists are well known here. But the problem to me is that in this current situation in Bulgaria, we should go actually back to the studies of imperialism and colonialism and to classics like Gramsci and even Lenin, who actually explains imperialism quite. I mean, for someone, for a young person who is full of discontent, what happens now is, and this is actually again in my dissertation, is that he would find this kind of way to explain himself why the world is what is in fascism, because this is the vacuum that has been opened. The fact that left ideas are sort of being, I mean, that there is now this official notion, if you will, that somehow the socialist past is so horrible that in some ways even communism is worse than fascism, which has started with our former president who passed away, Josef, with his book Fascism, but not in his book. In his latest sort of media appearances, he was enhancing this idea. Actually, I think in my opinion, that is to sort of quote, to paraphrase, he was saying that communism for him was a worse experience than fascism, because at least fascism did not attack private property. And that's what I mean, if you give this example to youth, that's inevitably going to have some outcome, right?
Because you mentioned Lenin's theory of imperialism, which is also very near by the theory of, for example, Rosa Luxemburg. I admire this great woman who was killed and who had an inspiring life, and a person who fought her whole life for equality, for freedom, and in my opinion, who was a libertarian socialist. And also it's worth to mention Karl Kautsky with his imperial theories of imperialism. And yesterday I had a wonderful conversation with Barbara Heller from Bremer Peace Movement, and she quoted Jean Jaurès. I hope I spell it correct. And this quote is also fascinating. Capitalism carries war within it, just like clouds carry rain. So yeah, this is a beautiful quote. Which
is a beautiful quote. I agree with you. Yes.
In one sentence, you have the whole imperialist theory. So and it's quite logical, because when you need to how can I say, occupy new markets, for example, or to when the capitalist system is driving you to move around, to grow, and you need other places where you can invest. So it's quite clear that someday your land mass will reach an end, and you have to go further and beyond your own territories to invest, to make the economy grow. So it's quite logical and simple, but people tend to forget this simple ideas. But before we go into this topic, and I believe Ukraine can also be understood in the theories of Rosa Luxemburg, in a war between two great powers, and the struggle for new markets, and the struggle for resources, and the struggle for elites who try to make Ukraine their sphere of influence. It's I wrote, for example, also an article about the Ukraine In my opinion, the Ukraine was between after the fall of the Soviet Union, between the two blocks, the West, especially the European Union, and on the other hand, Russia. For example, there are geopolitical mechanisms of external influence. For example, we can see this in the integration projects. For example, there is this EU foreign policy towards the Ukraine, European neighborhood policy, and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, we see Russia has as well some integrational projects with Belarus, with Kazakhstan, and so on and so forth, Eurasian Economic Union, and so on and so forth. So there are free trade agreements on both sides. There is 2014, the EU Association Agreement. So there are some kind of soft power tools, if we want to speak in neorealistic terms. There are the soft power tools who try to bring Ukraine in their sphere of influence. And also on the cultural side, we see this struggle, this contestation, this fight over ideas, over values, and over the past, of course. Because the one hand is always telling the story about Holodomor. I hope I spell it correct. And the other side tells always this narrative of Nazism and fascism. So I believe there are on many levels, on many dimensions, a great fight to bring Ukraine in their sphere of influence. And what is your observation on this kind of let us begin with the soft power and the cultural fight of Ukraine. Let us start with there and then move on to the greater geopolitical situation. What's your take on the Ukraine war and what it's all about?
Well, actually, I in some way I think that this notion of the Nazi collaboration past of Western Ukraine, let's be specific, Western Ukraine, is not Russian propaganda or exacerbated or, you know, used. I mean, I definitely is probably used in Putin's administration for political and militaristic purposes, but let's start with the Holodomor, for example. Maybe not everyone knows that the Holodomor, the term, I mean, the notion of the Holodomor as genocide against the Ukrainian nation, that nationalistic sort of interpretation of this horrible, disaster and catastrophe that happened, and we should not be we should be straightforward saying that this is a result of the collectivization policies and this is a consequences of that. But let's be clear about this. First, this narrative, speaking from an ideological point of view, was imported in Ukraine by the Canadian immigration, which primarily is this Western Ukraine immigration. This particular what I was talking about, these Ukrainian nationalists who were sort of allied with, were collaborating with the SS and were sort of part of the structures of the German, German army, Nazi army. I don't want to call German because this is Nazism is something that shouldn't be related, related to a particular nation, right? I mean, it's just a horrible ideology that anyway, I what I was trying to say is that this is a one-sided look at a historical event which is framed in this particular way to accumulate hatred for Russia, not for, because first of all, like in Holodomor,
against Russia.
Against Russia, which is historically inaccurate, because the participants, if you want to put intent in it, which again I'm hesitant to say that this was intentional, because there is also the attempt to ameliorate the situation by importing wheat from Persia when the Communist Party realized what is happening. But let's just say that the communists that were involved in this are Ukrainians themselves. They're part of the Ukrainian Communist Party. So I mean, then what is this is simply not historically accurate. If we're gonna go in this direction, also what they mean by Ukrainian nation, since this kind of interpretation of history, half of the country doesn't agree with it, and it was sort of imposed and stretched to the rest of the country, right? So with this process of invention of traditions and commemoration of certain figures, that for many of the people who lived in this territory, this state called Ukraine, are criminals, and they still view them as criminals, right? They view them as people who are perpetrating crimes against humanity and genocide, especially towards Jews and Poles, but also Ukrainians who were hiding their Polish neighbors. And of course Russians, right? So you know, this and so.
If I may, yes, I agree, and there is a academic debate on this. For example, on the one hand, you have people like Raphael Lemkin who wrote that this was a genocide, and for example, Gerhard Simon and Ernst Lüdemann, they also are speaking of with this term genocide, so it is intentional in their opinion. On the other hand, you have scholars, for example, Eastern European expert Jörg Gansemüller or Franziska Davis, or especially with the Holocaust, when you see what is intentional and structural, genocide. So therefore, we cannot speak from with this term genocide, because it was not in this sense intentional.
You mean the Holodomor? You mean? Or...
No. Franziska Davis compared it with the Holocaust, and then
I mean,
then she concluded that the Holocaust was intentional, and with a whole structure and bureaucracy in order to kill so many people. But on the other hand, you have this tragic event, where this didn't happen on the scale of planned scale and without structure and maybe without intention. So this is the point where the academics are debating.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this whole debate. This is not clear, and the debate is going on still.
Yeah, also there is this American historian whose name now escapes me, who has also written about it. But I'm not a historian, I'm a sociologist, and what interests me is more the ideological side of this, the way of presenting history, right? Because if we are to quote this great Haitian anthropologist Michel Rolf-Trouillot, he talks about silencing the past. So certain narratives remain silenced, and certain narratives are being established as the actual historical truth, but who creates the historical truth, right? So what I wanted to say is that I definitely, by saying that the Holodomor is not genocide, which I still claim that, this is my opinion, I'm not discrediting the fact that the Stalinist system created the conditions for this to happen. But the fact of the matter is whether they wanted to exterminate the whole people, or well, some call it classicide, right? I mean, this historians like we famously Ernst Nolte, German historian, who talks about classicide and actually compares then the genocide against the Jewish people, the Holocaust, and he came to such crazy ideas that he actually thought that he called the Holocaust imitation of the classicide of the Bolsheviks, which is absolutely, I mean, he went too far, I think, in my opinion. But even if we accept that Stalin was trying to destroy the big landowners, the kulaks, let's say, then this is not such a huge number of the population, and they're talking about millions of people, and not only in Ukraine. I mean, when they talk about Holodomor, they seem to forget that the hunger happened not only Ukraine. Ukraine was very severely impacted by the hunger, but it happened in Kazakhstan. So I'm again not a historian, not a geographer, but I know that for a fact that this was not the only area where hunger occurred, and to present it as an intentional way to destroy the Ukrainian nation, when you actually have a process of strengthening and enhancing and encouraging the creation of a Ukrainian nation during the Soviet Union and during Stalinism, right? Ukrainian schools in Ukrainian language being built and Ukrainian literature, so I mean, this doesn't, it seems to not, it doesn't follow through, the logic escapes me to try to destroy people and then actually enhance their culture and sense of identity, right? So
and also there is well documented books on that topic. For example, Samuel Salzborn wrote Kampf der Ideen, so to speak, fight for ideas. And there are many like Howard Zinn, Oliver Stone, Peter Kosinski, who wrote several books on the untold history. They are specializing on the US, but there are also many other historians. Ilan Pape and many others who wrote about the Palestine conflict and so on and so forth. But the list goes on. So there is this fight of the past and the fight for, okay, who tells the right story, so to speak. But also we can see, to be objective, in my opinion, it's as an academic, we need to be as much as possible objective. In this sense, especially if we call ourselves socialists or anarchists or whatever, we need to criticize both sides. We need to put the finger on empires, on exploitation, on power structures and elites. This is our duty, so to speak. And in this regard, we also have to mention the ideology of Putin's regimes. So, for example, I can see this in Serbian YouTube channels and media outlets, also in Bulgaria, this kind of idea of pan-Slavism. So there is this narrative that the Soviet Union and Russia helped us from the 500 years occupation of the Ottoman Empire. So this is one narrative. Then there is this brotherhood, this pan-Slavic brotherhood, and then there is this narrative of the church, the Orthodox Church. And we also have to mention that these are problematic narratives as well. It is not clear black and white. It is not the altruistic Soviet Union who want to free this brother Bulgaria from the Ottoman Empire. Of course, there are interests. Of course, there are elites. Of course, there are sphere of influences and Geostrategy and so on and so forth. So, and on the other hand, we have to mention that Putin's economic system is not socialist in any sense. So Putin's regime is neoliberal, and it's in the interest of some oligarchs. which are buying football clubs and yachts and so on and so forth. We know this story. We need to point both sides and the struggle, the elitarian struggle. And in the interview with Professor Ivo Christov, he mentioned one very interesting thing. He mentioned that this is not our struggle. When I asked him about the West and the East and Putin against Trump and so on and so forth, and he said, this is not our struggle. This is very important to keep in mind. In my opinion, as an anarchist, I can confirm that statement, that this is not our struggle. And we need to point the finger on both sides, and we need to criticize both sides, and both are imperialistic, both are oligarchic, and these are power structures. And yeah, what's your opinion on that? Rhetorical question.
That's quite a huge well, first on the question of what should I start with? Let's start with the question of pan-Slavism. That's something that was actually, as far as if I remember correctly, that's an ideology that is constructed during Ekaterina the Great. So you can imagine how far back in the past this goes. And it's nothing surprising that now this sort of narrative comes back, because if you look at Putin, as you mentioned very well, he's not a leftist. He's far from socialist. You probably heard his speech before invading Ukraine, where he directly
it was like a historical lecture.
Yeah, directly blaming Lenin and the Bolsheviks for the creation of Ukraine and all these kinds of narratives, and trying to reestablish this sort of symbolism of the Russian Empire and all that. But on the question of what's happening right now with the military operation, I'm a Hegelian. I think that we have a historical moment now which has the potential for something bubbling up from the ground up, and you can see it with the actual soldiers waving the flag of the Soviet Union, bringing back the people of the Donbass, bringing back the monuments of Lenin, and bringing back so this is a process of recreating, rebuilding collective memory that has been under attack for so many years. And that is one aspect which could in some way pressure Putin to turn to the left. Also, the geopolitical system itself, I mean, the geopolitical situation itself right now could play this role, could sort of pressure Putin to turn more towards China, right? And in that sense become more sort of on the left. But again, we shouldn't, I mean, I don't want to be sort of naive or romanticize this, or my opinion about the war is that this is not a war that started in the 24th of February. This is a war that has been going on for 8 years. It didn't start by Russia didn't launch this war, and I definitely think it's a preemptive war. Whether for the actual sort of intentions of Putin and his inner circle. Because I don't want to say that Putin is the only one, the only decision maker. There is no such. I don't believe in this fact of the sort of Hitler is the sort of decision maker, or Putin or Stalin is the only decision makers. Everyone works with an inner circle. So in that sense, I think that I lost my train of thought.
No, I can add something, or maybe I can also disagree on a specific, but maybe it's a misunderstanding. But
no, I just wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Putin has been maneuvering, right? Because again, because I'm interested in ideology, he has been maneuvering with symbolism. In the beginning, he tried to sort of establish the imperial insignia, the imperial symbols, but he sees that on the ground, actually, people don't care about the imperial past of Russia. They actually are trying to reconstitute the notion of the Soviet Union as this place where when people had rights, dignity, workers had rights, and so on. I mean, again, I don't want to romanticize it, but I think that's how. For definitely, because I've been talking to people who were there, documentary filmmakers, and they say that they are definitely, that's how the people in Donbass are experiencing it. But I'm sure that also people inside Russia as well. There are many people inside Russia that are sort of very nostalgic for the Soviet Union, precisely because of the neoliberal regimes that had started, of course, with Gorbachev, but with Yeltsin, there was this horrible shock therapy neoliberal regime leading to sort of plundering of resources and a new colonial situation, not much different from what we're experiencing now in Bulgaria. But this, of course, because Russia is a great power, did not really continue for a longer period of time. But let's not kid ourselves. This is not a regime that cares much about the working class, of course. I mean, and we know that there are socialists and communists that are against the war and are being suppressed there. We know that. So I tend to think of it as a dialectical contradiction. What's happening with the war? I'm definitely not for this war to continue, but at the same time, I don't disregard the denazification aspect, because it could be viewed as propaganda by the Russian state, the official propaganda. But there is also the fact of the matter is that there has been a process of creation of an extreme form of nationalism, an ideological process that, you know, that's also coming from inside and outside forces, right? So
of course, it's not a contradiction. It can be at the same time, both propaganda on one hand, in order to push the military invasion. On the other hand, it could be true. So it's not either.
No contradiction in the sense that there might be a potential there. You know, I don't want to be cynical, but there might be a potential for change, for change for the better, for mobilization of forces that could create, strong left movement and then a left party. That so. Like,
I understand your position, but in one aspect I have to disagree, because it's in my opinion it depends on the starting point. It depends on where do you start your analysis, where do you start your how can I say, how it depends on where do you through which lenses do you see it. For example, the question who started the war is very tricky. It's not an easy question, because you said that you don't believe that Russia started the war. Now, this is the tricky part, because if we start with the 24th of February, now this year, we have to accept that Russia started the war, but this is also a small narrative. So this is also a short period of time, and maybe a short analysis. If we start with the Maidan massacre or Maidan revolution, Maidan uprising, no matter how you call it, it also depends on through which lenses do you see the event, Maidan massacre or Maidan revolution, Maidan whatever. And the West involvement and the neo-Nazi involvement in this massacre, then of course you can debate the starting point of the war. Then you can say, okay, the West triggered some tensions, and with the shift, with the ideological shift, and with the shift of elites in the Ukraine, one towards Russia, and now after the Maidan towards the West, towards the NATO and the EU. Now we can say, okay, maybe the West triggered the war. These are kind of argument you see neorealist and realistic theories. For example, John Mersheimer is one famous example of this kind of argumentation. So that's why I needed to precise, and I believe you agree with me, but in the same sense, I have to clarify that who started the war is a very tricky question, and you see here the importance of ideology, because ideology is this game of simple answers and of tricky questions. So you have to debate where is your starting point. This is the and if you go further, if you go to the 90s, or if you go beyond that, for example, then you have empirical struggles, then you have power structures, then you have two oligarchic systems that are fighting for each other, against each other, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's more tricky than one answer can explain it. So if you, I believe you agree with me.
Yes, I just want to point out that in terms of Putin's reasoning for starting the war, not his justification of the war, public justification of the war, but his reasoning in terms of clear sort of geopolitical interests and concerns, and feeling a threat, if you will. I totally agree with John Mearsheimer. I think his realist approach is, I tend to also view this war in that sense, and I'll tell you why. Because I think, it's absolutely hypocritical, but this is another aspect. But okay, let's say it's we'll be very short. It's absolutely hypocritical on part of the United States to be claiming anything else, since that. Because the United States in 1904, if I'm not mistaken, has the Monroe Doctrine, which says that the Western Hemisphere should be under the interests of the United States. Nothing should be threatening the power, the hegemony of the United States in the Western Hemisphere, meaning, Latin America. So if someone comes in and starts building military bases and trying to get in, in Mexico, and sort of like wants to join a hostile military union, let's say by Russia and China, military structure, military organization against the United States, I don't think the United States will sit there idly. I don't think it will even sit there for 8 years and wait like that, right?
That's what happened in Nicaragua many times.
And, Nicaragua and the Cuban Missile Crisis, people keep referring to, but they don't. The
International Criminal Court also judged the invasion of the US in Nicaragua. I believe it was in 1986. So there is a criminal record of the US in this sense. Yeah, I totally agree. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, but so that's I wanted to be short on that, and actually go in another direction, if you allow me. Let's move away from Putin's intentions and Putin's regime or government, and whatever word you wanna use. I think it's fair to say that this is certain dictatorial form of governance, but I wouldn't call it like a dictatorship in the sense of like severe dictatorship. I think
call it also fascism. It's also a modern term now to call it. If I remember correctly, I saw many political commentators in the West who called it fascism.
I would disagree with that term,
but nonetheless, yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't remember who coined the term benevolent dictatorship for Tito. Josef Broz Tito. Maybe that's what we have with Russia. I don't know, but well, it's it's becoming encapsulated, but not so much because of its own of the desire of its own, political elites. It's becoming more encapsulated, that's for sure, as a result of the war. But let's move away from Russia and look at the United States as a hegemon, right? Let's look at the global capitalist system. And my premise is that at least since the fall of the Berlin Wall, United States had established hegemony in Europe, and it was a sort of a unipolar. Is it called
unipolar order? Yeah.
Yeah, unipolar order with the United States as the hegemon. But if we look at hegemony in the Gramscian sense, that you have to establish hegemony through consent and coercion, and he is actually emphasizing on consent, not coercion. This is a question for you, actually, because I'm very interested. I've been thinking about this. Can we actually even think of the United States having hegemony now, even in the European Union, since it's actually acting as this sort of bully that is kind of pressing Europe to do their bidding, to actually do their will, right? So I wouldn't call that hegemony, right? Because it creates this notion of solidarity, which is so stupid to think about this word in, when we talk about neoliberal form of supranational governance, but this notion of unity of the European Union, but underneath something is, not the case at all, right? I mean, there's so many things signaling that, that Europe is not unified in its attempt to in its in its Russophobia, let's say, right? That this Russophobia is sort of the propagandistic aspect of the kind of way to establish ideologically the official discourse. But I'm not sure if it's still a discourse. I think that this discourse is cracking, more and more. Recently, just today, I was looking at a Spanish journalist who was talking about, who was on the ground in Ukraine and talking about what the Ukrainians are doing to the civilian population, and how the people inside the studio were trying to sort of, spin it and do damage control. But these kinds of things are starting to come out, that these different points of view. And I don't think all of the European states inside the European Union are happy being deprived of Russian gas, right? So and energy resources. And so, yeah, do you think that the United States still has a hegemony? I mean, and not to speak that that now it's very fashionable to say, oh, the world is against Russia, but what is all the world when actually, the people, the countries that are strictly, have positions themselves as enemies, if you will, of Russia, and are the countries controlled by the United States, United States, European Union, and a few other countries.
Commonwealth of Nations.
Commonwealth of
Nations, for example, Great Britain, Australia.
Exactly, the nations under the Queen, right? Yeah, and
NATO members, and so on and so forth.
And Japan, which has this whole huge military bases inside it, U.S. military bases, and South Korea, and but then you have China, India, Brazil, Latin America,
which makes
India,
most of the world population.
Sorry?
Which makes the biggest part of the world.
Yes,
it's the bigger part of the population. This
absolutely, absolutely.
And also many African countries.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, and not to speak that there were so many attempts to pressure, especially the bigger countries inside this, what, let's say, the global south, to go along with the US, but they were unsuccessful.
I totally understand you, and I agree. And this is because we mentioned Gramsci and hegemony. And this is also a very tricky question, because I follow here the line of Gramsci, I follow here the line of Noam Chomsky, and even I would go further and quote Malcolm X. And Malcolm X, and I believe these three thinkers, in one sense, they believed in the same thing, because Malcolm X put it that the liberals are like foxes. You believe they are smiling, but actually they are fletching their teeth. They're actually not with good intentions, but you believe that they are smiling. On the other hand, and this is the kind of consensus that Gramsci was talking about. Gramsci's consensus is the smiling fox, and also Noam Chomsky put it like this. And but in other words. And on the other hand, Malcolm X talked about wolves. And in my opinion, China and Russia is a wolf, because when they are fletching the teeth, you will feel it. This is not a smile. You run away from kilometers. So what does this mean? It does mean that maybe the power structure is different, maybe the ideology is different, and but nonetheless, they are both hegemonic projects, and they are both, so to speak, power structures. And Noam Chomsky also asked a very intense and very complex question, because he said that the West has this sublime structure and tools of power and manipulation, and it is not that simple, because we in the West, we feel free. We believe in the free media, in the free press, and we believe that we are free people, and the rest is not free. The rest is a dictatorship. So in this regard, I believe that Gramsci, Chomsky, and Malcolm X are on the same page, and I totally understand you. And it's very tricky, because we in the West believe, okay, the West is the good guy and the others are the bad guy. And yeah, it's tricky. And here I totally agree with you. And I observed also another point. There is a contradiction in the public debate, as far as I can see. For example, on the one hand, we have a lot of media reports in the Western media, New York Times and Frankfurter Rundschau, Tagesschau, even the German and Austrian Bundeswehr, Bundesheer, the military institutions are publishing, and on YouTube and on many other sites are publishing many reports. And it seems that it suggested, so to speak, that the Russian army is just a tiger paper, a military tiger paper, and the Russian forces are losing. I was very amused how Docent Ivo Valentin Vatsev put it. In Western media, you always will hear that Russia lost the war. Even if Russia wins the war, we in the West, the Western media will tell you Russia lost the war. So it's funny, but actually there is some truth in it. And in my opinion, I can observe this. On the other hand, this is the paradoxical moment in this public debate. On the other hand, you see peoples from the Green Party, peoples from the Social Democratic Party, and liberals who are shouting out and very loud in social media and in public debates and the public discourse, and they come up with worst case scenarios. They are where they stated or where they did some prognosis that Putin will eventually occupy Ukraine. Also, they said that with this worst case scenarios, that he will invade Georgia, Moldavia, the Baltic states, and even go beyond Poland. So this is the narrative on the other spectrum, that we can see that this great empire, this strong military forces, this David and Goliath narrative, you know, and you cannot believe in both at the same time. This is the paradox of the liberals nowadays. You cannot believe that Russia is losing the war in the Ukraine. On the same hand, you are afraid that Russia is going beyond Poland and even invading Austria. You cannot seriously believe both stories, both narratives at the same time. So this is crazy, and this is so I can only smile, but it's tragic.
Doesn't this remind you of the paranoia of the liberals that the Bolsheviks are coming and they're going to conquer all of Europe, and there are these monsters and non-human, and I mean, that's sort of, I guess every time there is something that resembles something different from this fundamentalist notion of the free market and the workers knowing their place and all that, the paranoia of the liberals starts to emerge. That's kind of jokingly, but I'm not a Freudian, but to play this, again, a sort of pseudo psychologist, as especially American analyzers of Russia like to do nowadays, because they don't engage in analysis; they engage in some psychologizing of the persona of Vladimir Putin, right? All they say is Putin is this, Putin is that, Putin, Russia is doing this because Putin is this. So I'm just going to say, maybe this is a projection in a Freudian sense. What they want to do, they're projecting it on the. I totally think this is absolute rubbish to be thinking that Putin long-term strategy is to sort of conquer the Baltic states, recreate the Soviet Union. I mean, I wish he would recreate the Soviet Union, if you ask me, but that's not going to happen. I don't know what to make of it. I think then we have to ask ourselves the question, are we just strictly talking about liberals because it's easy? If we're talking about liberals, it's easy. I don't expect anything different. Yeah. But we're talking also about what at least is self-identifying as the left. Yes. We see the left, if not crying for no-fly zone, if not that folly, at least, I mean, they're not really that critical about the other side, right? They're critical about the invasion of Russia, but they seem to be kind of not very, they would mention NATO here and there, but I think now, if you are for peace, the focus should be on stop arming Ukraine, stop sending weapons to Ukraine. But then again, you just realize that how horrible this game is, because it is both military-industrial complexes that are gaining from this war right now. It is the military-industrial complex which the Secretary of State in the United States comes from. Let's point to that fact. It's not important that he is African-American. It is important that he comes from Raytheon, from the military-industrial complex, from the private military-industrial complex that is producing the Javelin system right now, that is being sent to Ukraine. So this is the person who probably still sits, or I don't know, but he comes from the board of directors of Raytheon. But I'm not naive. I think the same thing is happening in Russia as well. The military-industrial complex in Russia is also gaining from this.
Absolutely. Let's stick with the topic of left liberals, because it's also very important to make a precise distinction and to be precise, because in my opinion, there is some, like Nancy Fraser put it very well in some articles in her book on progressive neoliberalism. So there is this discourse on progressiveness of woke culture and wokeness, and to be inclusive, to this but actually Nancy Fraser is correct in this sense, that this is all in my opinion, it's in this discourse of progressive neoliberalism. And many left liberals, social democrats are falling for this. But this kind of philosophy is, in my opinion, not left. It has nothing to do with left-wing philosophy. Because if you are a left-winger, you have to be egalitarian in a radical sense, and in also in a materialistical sense. Because it doesn't matter if, for example, the chancellor in Germany is Angela Merkel, a woman. It doesn't matter if Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, Ursula von der Leyen, Margaret Thatcher. I go on and go on, and the list is going on. So you understand my point.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they are women. It doesn't matter if they are black or white. The outcome is also very important, and the policies are important. Under the presumption of liberalism and capitalism, it doesn't matter if you are black. You automatically exploit other black people, and so we have to deconstruct the power system and the ideology behind that. And this is the critical point where white liberal feminism, for example, don't go far enough, in my opinion. They have some good points, and I agree on many of them. I actually call myself queer feminist. I believe in feminist values, but I'm very critical of white capitalist liberal feminism. So we have to be very precise on the debate, you know.
On the question of wokeness, I think those people should, if they ever read it, should reread Fanon's black skin, white mask, right? I mean, this is exactly what it is. This is the notion of this is sort of the African American or whoever who is brought up in the values of the oppressor or the colonizer, and now starts to think that he is part of, he's part of the circle, he's part of the club, right? And this is the defense minister. This was Obama. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. That a Marxist critique of this kind of phenomenon, not a phenomenon, but this current stage of capitalism should be exactly that. We shouldn't be caring, because I mean, one of the biggest war hawks in history are women: Margaret Thatcher, Hillary Clinton, Madeleine Albright, who recently passed away. I mean, it's so.
Ursula von der Leyen is also very loud on weapon delivery and on militarization of the EU. So Ursula von der Leyen is also not a peaceful.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter, what gender you are, what sex you are, what is the color of your skin. What matters is your class position and also your position within within power, right? What kind of a position you are, what's your, as Gramsci would say, what's your function within society? And when he was talking about intellectuals, he was talking about category of intellect. Everyone is an intellectual, everyone can be a monkey cannot be an intellectual, because you can't train a monkey to, what was his, I think his example was, you can't train a monkey to iron board or something like that, right? So everyone has the capacity to think and to be to exhibit intelligence, but an intellectual is a certain category, certain class that functions in society, right? I mean, that's why you have traditional intellectuals and organic intellectuals, right? So maybe we can think of those liberals as these organic intellectuals of the new liberal system, because they're completely fine with capitalism, they're completely fine with class disparity, they're completely fine with the benefits that the system provides. They're just criticizing some aspects that are not threatening to the core of the system. So
yeah, it's in my opinion,
and they're hypocrites. That's their main trend, I think. So.
I believe it's very important not to prioritize one form of oppression over the other form. So class, race, gender, they are, in my opinion, equally important. And in my opinion, they have to be equally also tackled, at the same time. We don't have to say, okay, it's just a class struggle. Yes, it is a class struggle, and it is a worldwide class struggle. But at the same time, we see, even before capitalism was invented, even before Columbus invaded, even before Europe invaded Latin America, there was some forms of oppression. There are racism, sexism, and so on and so forth. The history of rape, for example, of male dominance, goes far beyond capitalism. So we have to be clear that the human mankind is not so simple. So there are forms of oppression, and we have to treat them with respect. And the position of a person, if they are homosexual, and so on and so forth. So this is important, and it's not quite simple as that you say, okay, if capitalism falls and if the system breaks, everything is perfect, and we go to paradise and everything is beautiful.
But this is, as we say in Bulgaria, this is like putting the carriage in front of the horses. I always come to this example. The Bolsheviks took power, and then they implemented, policies for gay rights, for equal gender and sex policies, and so to be demanding that from a neoliberal state, to me, that's a little bit, that's. I'm not sure whether this is a good approach.
Yeah. Also, it is also just words. And pro forma, but not in reality.
Performance politics, right?
Yeah. So that's basically the point of Nancy Fraser's term progressive neoliberalism. It's just pro forma. It's just, you can talk a lot, but in reality, the reality looks different. And also our that you mentioned earlier, Polina Manolova, she's also an expert on the Green Party, and she looked very carefully at the discourse of the Green Party, and it's quite astonishing how the Green Party is forcing now the weapon delivery, and many of the Green Party are shouting out, we need to go to war and weapons delivery, and we have to help the Ukrainians. But not in a humanitarian or diplomatic sense, but just strictly in a neo-hawk sense. And this is quite amazing, and
fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's fascinating and tragic as well, because I drew some parallels with the Yugoslavian war, because there also, if you remember,
Joschka Fischer,
yes, and if I remember correctly, the Green Party and the Social Democrats in Yugoslavia many of them compared Slobodan Milosevic with Hitler, and this was what is this? It's historical, absolutely absurd.
Ridiculous. The comparisons with Hitler starts with Noriega, which is ridiculous, right?
And then Saddam Hussein, and we see this comparison many times, and it's ridiculous. And the Green Party is playing their roles in this ideological warfare.
Do you think they will lose their electorate as a result of that?
No, because I talked a lot. I love to debate, and I love to be polite and respectful, but I love to debate, and I debate with left wings, left liberals, with the Green Party members, and people who voted the Green Party, and almost many, maybe the greatest part of my friends, academic colleagues, comrades are voting for the Green Party, and I debate a
Wow.
lot with them, and they cannot see the point. They cannot see that they are hypocritical, and in my opinion, it's because they read a lot of, for example, left liberal papers. Because in left liberal papers, the tricky thing is that oftentimes they say some good things, oftentimes with the social democratic terms of social welfare state and so on and so forth, and democratization of democracy, and it's quite a left discourse, but they don't see that this is just a discourse and the reality is different. And but okay, it's to cut a long story short, I believe they will not change their minds. So you have to be an anarchist or some sort of Marxist to understand the system and the ideology behind it. It's unfortunately it's like this.
In the Bulgarian case, I think they're done. I mean, they're not going to be able to get into the next parliament, I think. That's my estimation, but my prognosis, but it's because solely for a different reason. Not it's because I think all of these parties are now losing their electorates because the majority of the population is still having good feelings for Russia, and we kind of touched on that. But the reasons for this are historical, and we shouldn't be just underestimating the fact that Bulgaria is an independent state as a result of the Russia-Turkish war, no matter what were the intentions again of the Russian Empire. And the other thing is that, to me, what is very concerning right now, and I'm finding very dangerous, is this attempt to sort of censor and control and to censor and to even stop the access to Russian culture, Russian art, Russian literature, Russian music, and so on. Not only here, just in general in Europe and the United States even. I mean, that's also, I mean, we shouldn't be sort of looking at North America and thinking, I mean, that's not that, it wouldn't be that difficult. No, there are people who are very interested in Russian culture. As you know, these are multi-national societies and multi-ethnic, and so there is a Russian minority there, and not only the Russians. I mean, losing access to every culture is horrible. We don't want to go back to the times of burning books, right? So that's
if you look at Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, who were in their belief system very progressive and very critical about power structures, you have to respect this kind of literature and of kind of thinking. So it's amazing how you can call yourself a left wing, and on the same side and in the same time believing in the same people who were burning basically Dostoevsky books and Tolstoy books. So it's quite amazing how you could and like I said, the paradox before, you cannot believe in two contradicting sentences at the same time. You cannot believe in two premises that are contradicting itself at the same time. But the problem of the left, maybe, and here again, to be precise, left liberals, because they are not left in the sense that authentic left, in the sense that, it's important to
Then the question is, are we having unconscious liberals who are thinking that they are left?
I believe that many liberals see themselves as revolutionary, as progressives, as fighting for feminism, as fighting for equality. I believe that. I spoke with many of them,
but they don't think they don't consider themselves liberals, right?
That's the problem. That's the problem, that many of them don't consider liberals, but if you debate with them, it's quite obvious that they are liberals. in their value system, in their belief system, even in their interpretation of history, in regards of imperialism, in being radical for radical equality, even in the form of democracy, for example, council democracy, but yeah, okay. So I don't want to go this debate in a kind of rant of left liberals. They have also their opinion, and sometimes they are right. Most of the times, in my opinion, they are not. But okay, it's like, and it's easy to fall in a fallacy. It's easy to fall in a trap. So we have to criticize them, but with respect. And I believe it's very important. Even we both. Many times we are on the same page, but sometimes we disagree, and it's important also to disagree. It's important to keep up the debate, to have an open debate, even with right-wingers and with conservatives, and because many of the people who are in the spectrum of conservatism, they are in some sense pointing out good stuff. For example, I agree on many things that John Mersheimer is talking about. I agree also on many things that Professor Ivo Christoph is talking about. Not on the whole thing, and not I disagree on many things, but it's also part of our culture. It's part of democracy, and even it's part of the scientific community. Without having a debate, you cannot have scientific debate.
Well, that's why I started to read recently some of the Russian thinkers, contemporary Russian thinkers, to see what's going on. Like people like to see the point of view, what's their point of view, where they're coming from. People like Andrei Fursov and Alexander Dugin, who is being called fascist in Western Europe. But reading him, I don't. I definitely see that he's coming from the conservative tradition, but I wouldn't call him a fascist. I mean, I think it's this label is being applying fascist. I mean, everyone is being called fascist now, who is outside of the spectrum of what liberals think of. And as for debates where you say discussion, I mean, I think I'm believer in the Socratic method, that discussion brings out the truth. But the liberals are the ones that are trying to close down discussions. The cancel culture comes from the liberal notion of what should be permitted and what should not be permitted. I think that again there are degrees. I don't want to debate with global warming deniers and Holocaust deniers, or people who believe that the earth is flat. Having said that, I really don't wish that they, don't exist. And, because, when we think about the green, there are some fringe aspects of the green that think that all of humanity is the problem. Let's get rid of humanity so the animals will all be fine and the planet will rejuvenate itself, right? So not to go into so again, it's a level of degree. I'm totally against cancel culture when it comes to the chance for everyone to express their opinion. But when you have people who are really calling out for some hatred or denying history, and then but I don't think that, let's say, the ones that have been sort of the cancel culture dears, like Jordan Peterson, for example, and I don't can think of someone else. Even Alex Jones. I don't think these are people who go into that category of the Holocaust deniers, the global warming deniers, or and the global warming deniers are, again, like, it's a very new. There is also a big spectrum there. We should then ban Michael Crichton. He's a global warming denier. The famous novelist Michael Crichton. So again, this is also very
I always in many interviews I always say the same thing, that in my opinion it's very critical, the whole discussion about cancel culture, because who is this person? And here I'm in the tradition of Noam Chomsky. Who is this person, or who is this institution? Who legitimize, give power to this institution to select
who decides?
Who decides what is truth and what is not true, and what is truth, and also where is the thin line of what is allowed and what is not allowed. And it's a big debate on the left, and I believe it's very important to discuss it. And it's also very important, especially in times in crisis where you don't have much time, to select, whom I trust and what opinion is more important, to prioritize. But in times where we have a lot of time and we can discuss and we can debate, we need to open up the debate. For example, Slavoj Žižek stated it very clearly that it's always a hard job, for example, to start at level zero, and to discuss, should I kill a person just because the person has a black skin, or should I rape a woman because I'm today in the mood of it. So there are absurd discourses and there are absurd topics, I understand, and fascism, Nazism, and
I think
Žižek is also right on that, if in the sense that it's costing time and it's absurd discussion. On the same time, you need to to pick these people up and to show them, hey, you are wrong on this and this. And I believe people can change. I believe with debates, with discussion, with showing facts, people can change. Not everybody. Also, there is mental illness. Also, there are bad people who have bad intentions. This is the humankind. This is the human mankind. The human, So So I believe we discussed a lot of things, a lot of topics where we went very far, and I don't have any further questions. I just have to thank you very much for this great discussion, debate, talk,
thank
interview.
You as well, Thank you for inviting me, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope we will keep collaborating.